The jungle of Virex 7 was always quiet at night, except for the soft hum of glowing plants and the calls of tiny creatures. But tonight, something new arrived. It wasn't a beast or a storm. It was a man, a human, wearing old, brown robes and carrying a small wooden box. He walked slowly through the trees, calm and silent like he belonged to the jungle itself. His name was Father Elias. The villagers of Coratel, a small alien town deep inside the jungle, watched him with fear and confusion. They had never seen a human this close, not without weapons, not without soldiers, but Elias came alone. He smiled kindly and asked only one thing. "May I build a temple to pray?" The council laughed at first, but the elder nodded. "If he brings war, the jungle will eat him," they said, so they allowed it. Within a few days, Elias had built a small temple from stone and vines. Every morning he sat and prayed. Every evening he lit small candles and sang in a language no one understood. The villagers stayed away, but the young ones watched from afar, curious, confused, and a little afraid. Among them was a girl named Sherry. She was barely 17 in human years, with blue skin, golden eyes, and long tendrils instead of hair. She was sharp, curious, and brave. She had never trusted outsiders, but something about this human made her stay and watch, quietly hiding behind the trees. One night, something strange happened. Elias invited the villagers to his first sermon. Most refused. Some laughed, but a few came, just to see the strange human's ritual. Sherry came too, hiding at the back near the entrance. She didn't plan to stay long. Elias stood at the center of the stone floor, a soft fire burning behind him. He looked around, smiled gently, and said, "Thank you for coming." Then he opened his small wooden box. Inside was a single relic, round, black, and marked with symbols no alien in the village had ever seen. But when he placed it on the stone, it began to glow, bright and red like blood. The air turned heavy. The wind stopped moving, and the animals outside grew silent. Sherry felt her chest tighten. Everyone stared at the relic, wide-eyed. The elder stood up, trembling. "That relic, it's sacred. It was sealed in the old world ruins, untouched for centuries. How do you have it?" Elias didn't answer directly. He looked into the flames and whispered, "It came to me when I became something else." Then he began to speak. His voice was soft, but it echoed in everyone's mind. He spoke of mercy, pain, hope, and sins. But every word felt heavy, like the air itself was listening. Sherry's skin shivered, her heart pounded. The fire behind Elias burned brighter, not yellow or orange, but white, too bright to stare at. And then, the relic pulsed. One strong pulse of light pushed through the temple, shaking the walls. A scream rose from one of the villagers. They dropped to their knees, their eyes rolled back, others panicked, running out. But Sherry stayed, frozen in place. She saw Elias open his arms wide, as if embracing the sky. His shadow stretched, too long, too tall, like something was behind him. And then silence. When Sherry looked again, the fire had died. The relic was dark. Elias stood alone, breathing calmly. "This was not the sermon I planned," he said with a sad smile. But the truth always shows itself. Sherry ran back to her home that night, but her mind stayed behind. What had she seen? That relic had not reacted in centuries. No one, not even the Empire, could make it glow. And yet, this human priest had done it by simply standing near it. That night, the jungle whispered of old things awakening. The stars above seemed to watch more closely, and in the heart of Coratel, a human priest lit another candle and prayed again. But this time the jungle did not hum back. It stayed silent. Something had changed, and Sherry knew, deep in her heart, that this priest was not just a man of peace. He carried something older, something dangerous, and she was going to find out what it was. The next morning, Sherry didn't tell anyone what she had seen in the temple, not her mother, not the elders, not even her friends. But her mind wouldn't rest. That glow, that relic, that strange feeling, none of it made sense. And the way Elias had smiled, as if he knew something no one else did, haunted her. So she went back. At first she only peeked from the trees, hiding in the thick leaves of the jungle. The temple stood still, peaceful, but then she saw him. Father, Elias, sitting in front of the altar, his eyes closed, hands folded, and lips moving slowly in prayer. He looked calm, kind, even gentle. But the air around him shimmered. It was not normal, like heat waves rising from fire. But there was no fire, no smoke. It was like the space around him was bending. Sherry blinked hard and rubbed her eyes, but the shimmer didn't go away. She stayed for hours, hiding, watching, waiting. Every day after that, she came back to spy on him, morning and evening, always quiet, never speaking. She watched him clean the temple, feed birds, help old villagers carry water. Nothing dangerous, nothing violent, just a human priest living simply. But Sherry's instincts told her something was wrong. On the 5th day, something strange happened. She hid behind a thick root near the back of the temple. Elias was deep in prayer. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the jungle floor. Sherry was about to leave when she heard something. A low hum, not from the temple but from the ground itself. She pressed her palm to the earth and felt it, pulsing like a heartbeat, slow, deep, ancient. Her eyes shot back to Elias. And that's when she saw it. His shadow was no longer his own. It had changed shape, no longer human. The shadow stood tall with horns, wings, and long arms stretching across the floor. And yet, Elias hadn't moved an inch. His body still bowed, his hands still folded, but his shadow was watching her. Sherry gasped and ducked lower, heart racing. Was it her imagination? A trick of the light? She waited, holding her breath, but the shadow didn't go away. It just stood there, still and dark, as if it knew she was there. Then suddenly, Elias stopped praying. He stood slowly, turned toward the jungle and spoke. You should not fear what you don't understand. Sherry froze. He had seen her? Heard her? She didn't answer, didn't move. He continued, Curiosity is not a sin, but what you choose to do with knowledge. That decides what you become. Then he walked back into the temple, closing the door behind him. Sherry didn't sleep that night. She kept hearing his voice in her head, soft, calm, but powerful like a mountain whispering to the wind. Who was he? What was he? The next morning she went to the Elders' library, deep underground, dusty and filled with old records. She searched all day, books, scrolls, memory crystals, anything about humans, priests, or relics. Most records talked about humans as explorers, warriors, or merchants, nothing about priests. But then, she found something. A broken stone tablet, hidden at the bottom of a locked drawer. The words were old, cracked, but one line was clear. Beware the preacher of fire. He wears the robe of peace, but speaks in the voice of the void. Below the words a sketch, a human with a long robe and a glowing relic in his hand. Behind him a planet burning. Sherry stepped back, trembling. She looked again. Same relic, same robe, same kind eyes. It looked exactly like Elias. She carried the tablet home, hiding it in her satchel. She couldn't stop thinking about the shadow, the glowing relic, the pulsing ground. The signs were clear. Something was awakening in the jungle. And it was, connected to this priest. The next evening she didn't hide. She stood at the edge of the temple, arms crossed, watching Elias as he lit candles on the altar. He noticed her but didn't speak, just gave her a small nod and continued praying. This time she stayed until the candles burned out. The air still shimmered, the relic still hummed softly, but there was no fear in her heart now. Only one question, who are you really, Father Elias? She didn't ask it aloud. Not yet, but she would. Very soon, because deep inside, she knew something the others didn't. This man, this human priest, was not. Here by accident he had come for a reason, and whatever it was only just beginning. The jungle winds whispered warnings. Far away beyond the trees and the glowing plants of Virex 7, in a massive floating city high above the clouds, a message reached the Empire's ears. A small report, hidden between news of trade and minor uprisings, but this report was different. It spoke of a human priest who had awakened an ancient relic with just his presence. The Empire had once tried to activate that relic years ago. They had sent scientists, machines, even mind sorcerers. Nothing worked, not a single flicker of light. But now, this priest, this unknown man, had made it glow without touching it. The High Commander of Sector 9 read the report twice, then again. He didn't like it. "Send the Black Hunters," he said without looking up. "Make sure it looks like an accident." The Black Hunters were no ordinary soldiers. They were silent, cold, and trained in secrets. They didn't wear armor that made noise. And they didn't speak unless ordered. They were the Empire's invisible hand, the ones sent to kill problems before they became legends. They arrived at Coratel during a stormy night. 4 shadows dropped from the sky, landing without a sound. Their eyes scanned the jungle, heat signatures glowing in their helmets. The temple appeared ahead, lit by small candles and the faint pulse of the relic inside. Sherry felt it first. She was near the temple, not watching. Elias this time, but drawing his face in the dirt, trying to understand what she had seen last night. That's when her head suddenly ached. Her vision blurred for a moment, like the air had shifted. She stood up quickly, looking around. Her instinct screamed. Something was wrong. Inside the temple, Elias opened his eyes. He whispered only 2 words. "They're here." The Black Hunters moved fast. They didn't knock, didn't warn. They burst through the wooden door like a shadowy wave, weapons drawn. The first one fired a silent energy blade straight at Elias's heart. It stopped an inch from his chest, frozen in midair, glowing red, unable to move forward. The hunter stared in confusion. Then, without warning, the blade turned and pierced the attacker's own chest. He dropped instantly, armor sizzling. The second hunter fired gas into the room, thick and choking. But Elias didn't cough, didn't even flinch. Instead, he stood up slowly, and the gas turned to ash around him. The third and fourth hunters stepped back, readying explosives. But before they could throw them, the relic on the altar let out a deep sound, like a bell, from the center of the planet. The ground shook, the walls of the temple cracked slightly, and then the relic pulsed again. Sherry ran toward the temple as fast as she could. She saw the last 2 hunters stumbling out, their weapons melting in their hands. Something was crawling over their bodies, dark symbols burning themselves into the metal of their armor. Then both hunters collapsed, motionless. By the time she reached the entrance, Elias was standing alone again, hands folded, face calm. The relic sat quietly on the altar, glowing a soft red, as if nothing had happened. Sherry looked at the broken door, the fallen hunters, the melted weapons, and then at him. "You killed them," she whispered. Elias turned to her slowly. "They came to kill me." "You didn't even touch them," she said, more afraid than ever. "I never do," he replied softly. Word of the failed mission reached the Empire in silence. The Black Hunters never reported back. The High Commander stared at the empty screen in front of him, fists clenched. "Prepare the Watchers," he said coldly, "and notify the Council of Chains. We may have found him." Back in Coratel, the villagers began to speak in low voices. Whispers floated from house to house. The priest destroyed the Empire's best without raising a hand. Some said, "He speaks to relics." Others whispered, "He is a demon in disguise." But Sherry knew better. She had seen his eyes. Sad, heavy, like he carried the weight of 1,000 battles. Not just power, but pain. Not just fire, but grief. That night, she sat outside the temple and asked quietly, "Why do you not run?" "You know they'll come again." Elias lit another candle and stared into the flame. "Because running would only delay the storm." "What are you?" she asked again. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed his eyes and whispered something in his strange language. The jungle grew still once more, and the stars above seemed to listen. After a moment, he opened his eyes and looked at her. "I am the answer to an old mistake," he said. And Sherry knew this was no ordinary man. This was something ancient, something waiting. And the galaxy would not be ready for what was coming next. Sherry couldn't sleep. Even after the black hunters disappeared and the village returned to silence, her thoughts kept spinning. The question echoed in her mind again and again. Who is he? Who is Father Elias? She had grown up hearing bedtime stories about brave soldiers, wicked empires, and ancient warriors who brought justice or destruction. But no one ever told stories about a priest who could melt weapons without moving a finger, or speak to relics that ignored gods. The next morning, Sherry made a decision. She was going to the Deep Archive, a forbidden place carved inside the mountain beyond the northern jungle. Only elders and researchers had access. But Sherry knew a secret way in. She had helped an old archivist once, and he had shown her a crack behind the stone wall that led inside. By afternoon, she was there, standing in the cold, dark tunnels of the Deep Archive. She lit a glow crystal and walked slowly, searching for the history scrolls. She passed shelves, full of broken tech, scrolls wrapped in ancient leaves and cracked memory crystals all forgotten. Then she found it, a sealed chamber marked with a single warning symbol. A human skull surrounded by 3 suns. Her fingers trembled, but she pushed the door open. Dust flew into the air and the smell of age filled her nose. In the center of the chamber sat a wide stone slab with carvings. She brushed the dust away, and her breath caught in her throat. There, carved into the stone, was a figure in robes. Standing before burning cities, his arms were open as if offering peace, but behind him, the sky was falling. Ships exploded. Planets cracked. Empires kneeled. Underneath was a name, old and almost erased. Eli Ash of the Flame Tongue. Sherry whispered, "It Eli Ash." She read the script carved beside it. Her eyes widened as she translated each word, slowly, carefully. He was the priest of mercy. But when the gods turned their blades, he spoke the forbidden prayer, and the stars obeyed. Him a forbidden prayer? Stars obeyed? Sherry stepped back, heart racing. Could it be? Was Elias truly Eli Ash? That name was from over 500 cycles ago. That man was supposed to be a myth, a ghost from a forgotten war. A holy man who once tried to stop the war between humanity and the galactic gods. And when they betrayed him, he unleashed something so terrible that even the gods begged for silence. She grabbed a scroll and tucked it into her satchel. She needed to show Elias, but when she returned to the village, the people were restless. Angry voices filled the square. "He's dangerous," one shouted. "He'll bring fire upon us all," another yelled. The village council had gathered, and the elder was silent, staring at the ground. Then the crowd parted as Father Elias walked calmly into the square. He looked at them all, his face tired but gentle. "I mean you no harm," he said softly, "but I will not stop praying." One of the villagers, a big man named Wren, shouted, "We don't want your prayers, priest. We want you gone." Others agreed, raising their voices. Some threw stones. One hit Elias in the shoulder, but he didn't flinch. He simply bowed his head and turned back toward the temple. Sherry couldn't take it anymore. She ran to him and shouted, "Stop. He's not a threat. He's the one who tried to stop the war long ago." And everyone turned toward her, confused. She held up the scroll. "This man, he's Eli Ash. He was betrayed, not evil. He warned the gods, and they didn't listen." The villagers murmured, some confused, others scared. Elias looked at her, a sad smile on his lips. "You should not carry my story, little one." "Then tell them," she said. "Tell us the truth." He stood silent for a moment, then nodded. That night, the entire village gathered outside the temple, not out of faith but out of fear and curiosity. Elias stepped forward and spoke. "I was once like many of you," he said. "I believed in peace, in mercy. But when my people were betrayed, I asked the stars for justice." He told them of the war long ago, how humanity had trusted the gods of the Galactic Council, how treaties were signed, how peace was promised. But when Earth lowered its shields in faith, the gods struck. They burned cities, poisoned oceans, and laughed at human cries. Elias was a priest then, devoted to peace. But when he saw the betrayal, something deep inside him changed. He didn't pick up a weapon. He picked up a prayer, a forbidden one. And when he spoke it, the stars themselves bent. Ships exploded mid-space. Empires collapsed in days. The gods who thought they were immortal fell screaming. And when it was done, Elias disappeared. "I came here not to start war," again, he said quietly, "but to find silence to heal. But I fear. War is looking for me." The villagers were silent, some still afraid, some beginning to understand. But Sherry? She stood taller now, eyes wide with awe. This man was not just a priest. He was a living reminder that even the gentlest hands could carry fire. And deep in the sky, unknown to all, the Empire's watchers were watching. Their ships cloaked, their weapons charged, waiting for the signal to strike. But they didn't understand one thing. They weren't watching a human. They were watching a prayer waiting to be spoken again. The stars were calm. The jungle slept in silence, and the temple glowed with soft candlelight. Father Elias knelt in front of the altar, his head bowed, praying in the same gentle voice he always used. But above the clouds of Virex 7, destruction was already falling. The Empire had made its choice. They had sent words to the Warlord of Fire, General Vorax, known across systems for burning rebel planets to ash. Vorax did not care about history or truth. He cared only about fear, and the message fear could send. "Burn the village, capture the priest, and leave nothing behind," he ordered. And so, the ships came, not small ones, but war cruisers. They entered the atmosphere cloaked, their engines whispering through the sky. Virex 7's defense systems didn't react. The planet had no army, no shields, only trees and forgotten stories. But one girl saw it first. Sherry was gathering roots near the cliff edge when the clouds above shimmered. Strangely, she looked up, eyes narrowing. "That's not mist," she whispered. Then she heard it. A low hum, unnatural and growing louder. Suddenly, shapes broke through the clouds, massive and sharp like blades made of metal. Sherry dropped the roots and ran. Back at the village, people screamed as shadows fell from the sky. The ships hovered like monsters, weapons glowing underneath. Loudspeakers echoed through the air. "Surrender the priest or be erased." Elias stood calmly in front of the temple, watching the ships. His face did not change. He did not run, did not hide. Sherry ran to him, breathless. "You have to do something. They'll destroy everything." Elias looked at her with calm eyes. "They've already made that choice." Then he stepped forward. He raised one hand toward the sky, not in anger, not in rage, but in silence. And the relic on the altar pulsed, with light, not red, not white, but a deep, glowing gold. The jungle trembled, the animals scattered. The clouds above began to twist like a storm made of glass. The first warship fired, a blast of heat brighter than lightning, shot straight toward the temple, but it never reached. Mid-air, the blast froze, then shattered into dust. The villagers gasped. Some fell to their knees. Others simply stared, mouths open. Elias didn't blink. He whispered a word. Unknown, ancient, maybe not from any human language. And the relic answered. It lifted into the air and spun faster and faster, glowing brighter. Above them, the warships began to shake. One of them exploded without warning. The fireball lit up the sky like a second sun. Pieces rained down into the forest, but Elias didn't stop. He stepped forward again, his shadow stretching behind him like wings of night. The second ship turned, trying to flee, but the sky twisted, again, swallowing it whole, not with fire, but with silence. It vanished as if it had never existed. The last ship hovered, its weapons disabled, crew screaming, trying to understand what they were facing. Then, the sky itself split open. Not literally, but that's how it felt, like reality had cracked for a moment. Something old and powerful stood behind Elias, unseen, but felt in every bone. Even the trees leaned away, as if bowing to a force beyond time. And then the warlord's voice came through the sky, shaking with fear. You are the flame tongue, you should not exist. Elias replied with just one sentence. I warned you. The final ship exploded not from fire but from inside, as if its own soul had turned against it. The sky cleared, the clouds returned, and silence fell again. No one spoke for a long time. Then, the villagers slowly stepped out of their homes, their eyes wide, their faces pale. They looked at Elias not with hate, not with anger, but with something close to worship and fear. Elias walked back to the temple, lit a candle, and sat down. As if nothing had happened, Sherry followed him inside. Why didn't you stop them sooner? He looked at her gently. Because I wanted them to choose peace first. She sat beside him quietly, her heart still racing. You destroyed 3 warships without touching them. No, he said. I reminded them what I once was. Outside, the jungle slowly came back to life, but the galaxy had already changed. Somewhere deep in space, high-ranking members of the Empire watched the ship feeds go black. Their faces pale, their voices quiet. One of them whispered, He's alive. The priest of fire is alive. And in hidden corners of the universe, the old ones, the ones who remembered the forgotten war, began to stir. Some with fear, some with anger, some with hope. Because the man who once made the stars burn had returned. And this time, he was praying. Not for peace, but for justice. The jungle was still smoking where the wreckage had fallen. Burnt metal and twisted engines lay scattered among the trees, yet no one in the village dared go near it. Not because of fear of fire, but because of fear of what they had witnessed. How could a single man destroy warships without lifting a weapon? How could a priest speak one word and make the sky obey? Sherry had seen it all, but the more she saw, the more confused she became. That evening, as the villagers whispered behind closed doors, she entered the temple. She found Father Elias sitting alone, facing the relic, the flame beside him flickering gently. His hands were folded, his head slightly bowed. She stood silently for a moment, then finally asked, You didn't want this, did you? Elias didn't turn. No, he said softly. I hoped I would never have to call on that part of me again. Sherry sat beside him. Then why did you? He looked at her now, his eyes tired, deep, full of something older than pain. Because I carry them, he said. The voices, the faces, the names. Of those who died in that war, I remember them all. What war? Sherry whispered, even though she knew the answer. The war that should have never started, he replied. A war between trust and betrayal, between light and shadow, between humans and gods. He touched the relic gently, and for a moment, it glowed gold. I was once only a voice, he continued, a voice asking for peace. But when the gods burned our skies, I became something else. Not a soldier, not a monster, but a flame given shape. Sherry listened without speaking. Elias closed his eyes. I prayed for mercy, but none came. I prayed for help, but none listened. So I prayed for fire, and it answered. He stood up and walked to the window, looking. Out over the village, I destroyed fleets, broke thrones, turned the sun itself against the betrayers. But why come here? Sherry asked. Why return now? He looked over his shoulder. Because I was tired of being feared, hunted, praised. I came here to be forgotten. She frowned. But they found you. He nodded. They always do. Evil remembers the ones who once stopped it. That night, a visitor came to the village, an old alien woman, wrapped in gray robes, leaning on a cane made of bone. Her skin was cracked like ancient stone, and her eyes glowed silver. She asked for the priest, and when Sherry led her to the temple, Elias stood slowly, surprised. I thought you were dead, he said quietly. I was, the old woman replied, but your flame lit a path even the dead could follow. Sherry stood frozen, not understanding. But Elias stepped forward and gently took the woman's hand. She smiled. "I bring a warning, child of fire," she whispered. "The Council of Chains is awake." Elias's eyes darkened. "They still exist?" The woman nodded. "Hidden in the core of the Empire, feeding on lies, they know you live and they fear you." "What is the Council of Chains?" Sherry asked, confused. "They are the ones who tricked the gods into war." Elias said, "The ones who whispered poison into the ears of empires. They profit from chaos. They wanted Earth gone. Not for power, but for silence." Sherry stared at them both. "Then what happens now?" The old woman looked at Elias. "You must choose, priest, hide again, or finish what you began." The temple grew quiet. After a long pause, Elias whispered, "I carry too many souls to stay silent now." The woman bowed her head. "Then, May, the stars walked beside you once more." She vanished that same night as quietly as she had come. Sherry sat outside the temple, watching the candles flicker in the wind. Elias joined her, his robe moving softly in the breeze. "You're not just a priest," she said. "No," he replied, "but I still pray." She looked at him, eyes wide. "Will you fight them?" "I will remind them," he said, "of what I became and why." In the sky above, new signals were being sent. Fleets assembling, generals waking from cryo-sleep, ancient weapons being polished, not just to capture Elias, but to erase the memory of what he had done. They wanted the truth buried under fire again, but this time he would not run. He would not hide, because the human priest who had once burned the stars now walked again, not for revenge, but for the weight of every soul who had been betrayed. The sky above Virex 7 had never been more quiet. No more warships, no more shadows hiding in the clouds. Just stars, bright, still, watching. But below, in the jungle, everything had changed. Father Elias walked slowly through the village. His robes brushed the ground, his eyes calm, but the air around him carried weight. The kind of weight that made even the birds stop singing. People no longer feared him like before. They didn't run or hide. They watched in silence, unsure whether to kneel or simply follow. Sherry walked beside him. She had stopped calling him priest in her mind. Now she just called him Elias, not out of disrespect, but because she saw the man, not the legend. She had seen him smile at a child, cry over a forgotten grave, and burn a warship with a whisper, and now he was leaving. "Where will you go?" she asked quietly. "Where the fire still burns," he answered. "There are places the Empire thinks it owns, where truth is chained and people suffer in silence." "Will you fight them?" she asked. He paused. "If they leave the innocent alone, I will only pray, but if they raise their blades again." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the jungle gold, the villagers gathered for one last time. Elias stood on the old stone platform in front of the temple, the relic glowing gently behind him. He looked at them, not as a god, not as a warrior, but as a man who had seen too much. "I did not come here to change the galaxy," he said. "I came to forget it. But sometimes," he continued, "silence becomes a weapon for evil, and when the voice of justice sleeps, suffering grows louder." He looked at the relic, then back at the people. "I have carried the weight of 1,000 souls. I remember every face, every scream, every hope that died in the fire of betrayal." The crowd was silent. "I will walk again," he said, "not to burn, but to remind, not to destroy, but to awaken." With those words, he stepped down, picked up the relic, and began his journey once more. Sherry followed him past the edge of the village, past the trees, and into the open field where his ship waited. It wasn't a warship. It was old, simple, built for travel, not battle. Yet something in its design whispered of ancient power. "You're really going?" she said, her voice low. He nodded. "The galaxy has forgotten too much." "Then let me come with you," she said suddenly, surprising herself. Elias looked at her, surprised. "Why?" Because someone needs to remember, she said. Not the stories they'll twist, not the lies the Empire will tell, but the truth. What you did, why you did it. Someone needs to carry that memory. He smiled, gently, softly, like a tired man seeing hope for the first time in years. Then we walked together, he said. The ship rose slowly, dust swirling beneath it. The villagers watched from afar. Some waved, some wept, all unsure if they'd just lost a savior or a storm, but they knew one thing for sure. The galaxy would know his name again, and far across space the stars began to shift. Whispers moved from planet to planet. Old rebels stirred in secret rooms. Ancient beings blinked awake, surprised to feel a presence they thought long dead, and deep within the Empire's heart, alarms sounded. They had tried to erase him. They had hidden records, silenced witnesses, rewritten history books. But now the galaxy remembered small planets painted his symbol on their doors. Soldiers laid down their weapons when they heard his name. Warships paused mid-flight, unsure if they were ready to face the one who once made the sky scream. He was not a myth anymore. He was movement. He was memory. He was fire walking in human form. And in the dark rooms of the Council of Chains, the members argued, frightened. One of them slammed the table and shouted, "He's just one man." But another whispered, "So was the last sun before it exploded." Somewhere in the middle of space aboard a quiet ship with a glowing relic and a girl who chose to remember, Elias lit a candle and began to pray again. Not for war, not for revenge, but for the truth to burn brighter than lies, and the galaxy, once asleep in comfort and silence, opened its eyes, because when a single human priest decides to walk again, the stars themselves hold their breath.